purpose of this video is to show you the difference between outputting your print statements using a comma and outputting them using the plus sign or the concatenation. And there is a difference, and I would prefer you use the concatenation for your print statements rather than the comma for various reasons, but I will show you some of them in this video. So here's a very simple input statement that's getting a value from the user, and we're going to put it into this variable amount. And then in our print statement, you can see that I've separated the string and the variable amount with a comma. And so if I run this code, let's go ahead and run it, and we're going to see that, oh, wow, there's a big space between the $sign and the 10. And if you notice in my print statement, in my string, there was not that big space. And so that's really not the way I wanted to format this output. And the reason for that is commas allow us to print out multiple things to our editor here, but it separates everything with a comma. So it's just really kind of putting a list out of things that we have asked it to print, which is not necessarily optimal, and certainly in this case it's not doing. I'd rather have that $10 next to the $sign. And so what I prefer you to use is the concatenation, which is the plus sign. And so now if I output with using the plus sign instead of the comma, I'll have more control of that spacing. So now I can get, and let's just run it so you can see that happening. And then run, and then I'll put in the 10 this time. And now you can see that it's eliminated the space between the $sign and the 10 because I'm actually joining these into one long string as opposed to separating them like a list with the comma. So that's the difference between the two. Now, depending on what version of Python you're running, you might not be able to make this output. You might get an error, and I'm going to simulate the error by doing this. What if I did, let's do print amount plus 7, for example. So here it's kind of confusing because I'm using the plus sign to add whatever they put into amount plus 7. So sometimes the plus sign can be a concatenator where we're joining strings together, or sometimes it can be doing an addition sign. And so Python does its best to determine what your use is of that plus sign. So now if I run this code, and you all might be experiencing, depending on which version of Python you're getting when you're trying to do a print, and I'll show you what's happening. So now I'm getting an error message, and the error message is saying something along the lines of, can only concatenate a string, not an int to a string. Well, that's maybe a little bit confusing, but let me just demonstrate something for you, just to bring the point home. I'm going to comment out this line so it's not generating an error. I'm going to type out something called type. So I'm going to print the type of amount. And so what I'm asking Python to do is let me know what you think this data type is. And so I'm going to run that so we can see it. We'll put in the number 10. Well, you and I know that that's an integer, but when I output it, notice that Python thinks it's a string. And so anything that comes in from this input statement is automatically going to be a string. And so our error message here on this print line, the reason why we get an error, I'm going to comment this out, we don't need it again, and we'll reprint this error message. And so if I run that, and I put in the 10, we'll get the error message. And the error message here is trying to understand, it's recognizing the 7. Python thinks that amount, we just saw a second ago, Python thinks amount is a string, and you're trying to do an addition sign with, it recognizes that 7 is a integer, and it doesn't know how to, what do you want me to be? Do you want to be a plus sign that adds, or do you want me to be a plus sign that concatenates? It's confusing, there's a conflict, which is why we're getting this error message. If that happens to you, either in your print statement or when you're trying to do a math problem like we're trying to do here, you need to convert the variable. In this case, we need to convert it to another integer or to a float because we need it to make this math calculation. And so we would say int, and then we surround the variable by the word int. And so what happens from there is Python will take this variable amount, convert it to an int, and now be able to make this addition because it knows, oh, these are both integers, I know how to add those together. And so if I encounter if I encounter in a print statement this same kind of error, depending on which version of Python you're running. In fact, if I convert it to the int, I probably can create that same error. Let me try it. Here's kind of ad-libbing it here. So now I'm going to print. I don't think that's what I intended to do. Let's try running that again. Run module. And I'm going to type in 10. It fixed it for me, but depending on which version you have, you might get a print statement that says it can't print because it sees amount as an integer now and therefore can't add them together. It can't concatenate them if it sees that this is an integer. This version of Python is trying to fix it for me, and it kind of made the calculation. Some earlier versions are not so forgiving. If that happens to you, then you can cast it or change it, just like we did the int, by putting the word str around your variable that Python assumes is an integer. And so now we've got a string that we're adding or concatenating to another string. So if you get these kinds of error messages that say something about a string and an integer or a float and a string, that's what Python is trying to tell you to fix. It's just trying to let you know that it has a difference of opinion on what you want me to do with the variable types, the data types, which is another reason why I would prefer you using the plus sign, because the comma lets you get away with mixing up data types, where the plus sign won't be quite as lenient, which is a better learning opportunity for you, because this is more likely what you're going to encounter in other languages that you like if you're going to be doing C# or Java next semester. Those are more likely to be more stringent on data types. So this is, again, a video why I would like to see you get away from using the comma rather than the plus sign to join your strings with your variables